Don't bother reviving her again. Just let the paperwork run its course. That was my stepmother's voice, steady as a weather forecast, coming from somewhere near the foot of my bed. I couldn't open my eyes. My arms wouldn't lift. The ventilator pushed air into my lungs in a rhythm I hadn't asked for, and the room smelled like iodine and floor wax and something floral that didn't belong in an ICU. My sister's voice came next, lower. What about the husband? My stepmother didn't hesitate. Grant signed nothing. I have the directive. My fingers were curled against the sheet. I kept them still. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets never stay buried for long. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe and join the family, because this story is one of the wildest ones we've ever told. Let's get into it. That conversation at the foot of my bed happened on a Monday, but the story that led to it started long before the machines, before the monitors, before my stepmother decided I was worth more to her dead than alive. My father, Douglas Myers, married Jeanette Harlow when I was 17. I remember the wedding because it was the first time I saw my father cry since we buried my mother. Different tears, though. My mother's funeral was December. Snow on the parking lot. My father gripping my hand so hard his knuckles went white. Jeanette's wedding was June. Garden ceremony behind her sister's house. And Douglas stood at the altar with this stunned, grateful look, like somebody had handed him a second plate at a dinner he thought was over. Jeanette wasn't a villain back then. I need you to understand that. She had her own daughter, Kelsey, who was 14 and nervous, and stood next to me during the ceremony in a dress she clearly hated. Jeanette herself was 42, with short brown hair and the kind of practical shoes that said she didn't have time for nonsense. She had been a bookkeeper at a medical supply company before she met my father. She quit that job to take care of him when the diagnosis came. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, then lung cancer. 12 years of oxygen tanks, hospital visits, medication schedules, and slow, patient decline. Jeanette managed all of it. She drove him to oncology appointments in her sedan with the cracked dashboard. She organized his pills in a weekly tray with little blue lids. She slept on a cot next to his hospital bed the last 3 months of his life and did not complain once. At least, not where I could hear her. Douglas died 14 months before I woke up in that ICU. He was 67. I was 28, newly married to Grant, working freelance as a graphic designer from a desk in our spare bedroom. And there was one thing my father asked me to do before his mind started clouding from the morphine. He asked me to sign a healthcare power of attorney naming Jeanette as my decision maker. I was 23 when I signed it. Unmarried. Jeanette was the closest thing I had to a mother. My father handed me the pen, and I didn't think twice. I should have thought twice. The first thing I remembered after the darkness was the beeping. One tone, repeated, exactly 4 seconds apart. Mechanical and indifferent as a metronome. Then the ventilator. A hiss. A push. A hiss. A push. Air forced into my chest like someone inflating a balloon that didn't want to be inflated. My mouth was dry. My tongue felt 3 sizes too big. My eyelids were sealed shut. Not by choice, but by whatever the human body does when it shuts down and restarts in the wrong order. I tried to move my right hand. Nothing. Tried the left. A twitch maybe, or maybe I imagined it. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Heavy, distant, numb from the hips down. Then the voices. At first they were just sound. Shapes of words without meaning. The way you hear a conversation in a language you don't speak. Gradually, the shapes sharpened. Said the neurologist is coming Tuesday. That was Kelsey. I recognized her before I recognized the words, because she was wearing that perfume. Vanilla and oat milk. Sweet enough to make your sinuses ache. She'd worn it since college. It was the first thing I identified in that room that wasn't medical. Tuesday is too late. That was Jeanette. Closer. Near the left side of my bed. Maybe standing. Maybe sitting in the vinyl chair I could hear creak when she shifted. A third voice. Male. Older. Professional. Mrs. Harlow, the patient's condition is stable. There's brain activity. We need to give the body time to... She wouldn't want to live like this. Jeanette's voice cut him off, and I felt something cold move through my chest that had nothing to do with the ventilator. I know my stepdaughter. She would not want machines keeping her alive. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and grab her arm and say, "I'm right here. I can hear you. I am alive." But my body stayed flat, sealed, silent. The muscles in my jaw wouldn't clench. My vocal cords wouldn't vibrate. I was locked inside myself, and the woman sitting next to me was trying to throw away the key. Kelsey's voice, near the window. "How long before they actually, you know?" Jeanette didn't pause. "There's a process. We just have to be patient." The manila folder came the next morning. I heard Jeanette's heels first, 3 quick clicks on the linoleum, then the softer scuff of her sitting down, then the unmistakable sound of a clasp being unfastened and paper sliding out. She didn't close the door all the way. The hall noise, a cart rolling, a distant intercom, leaked in around the edges. "Look at this." Jeanette's voice was low, directed at Kelsey. Paper rustled. "Douglas set up the trust so she gets it all at 30. All of it. $4 million. The number hung in the air. 4 million. I'd known about the trust in a general way. My father had mentioned it twice. Once when I was 21 and once a few months before he died. He'd said it was my mother's life insurance money, invested and grown over 2 decades. He'd set it to release on my 30th birthday. I hadn't thought about the details. I hadn't needed to. Kelsey's voice. "She's 29. 6 days. Jeanette's voice was tight, controlled, the way she sounded when she was calculating something. 6 days and she turns 30. And if she's alive when that happens, every cent goes to her. Not us. Her. But if she..." Kelsey trailed off. "If she doesn't make it to 30, the trust reverts to Douglas's estate. Which, per the will, comes to me." A pause. "All of it." I lay there, breathing the ventilator's rhythm, and felt the room rearrange itself around a fact I hadn't understood until that moment. The trust wasn't just money. It was a clock. And Jeanette had been counting the days since the moment I was admitted. 6 days. That was how much my life was worth to the woman who had made my father's soup for 12 years. Not because she hated me, not because I'd done something wrong, but because a calendar and a bank account had aligned in a way that made my death convenient. I heard her close the manila folder and set it on the bedside table. The clasp clicked shut. I felt the weight of it there, 3 inches from my hand, like a verdict someone had already signed. Grant and I had a thing about Tuesdays. It started when we were dating. He was working construction, still is, and his crew ran Monday through Saturday, early starts, long days. The kind of work that leaves your hands raw and your back stiff by Wednesday. But every Tuesday at noon, no matter what, he'd call me. Not text. Call. He said texting felt like leaving a note on someone's door instead of knocking. The first Tuesday he called, I was sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor eating cereal out of the box and trying to fix a logo for a plumber in Ridgedale who wanted something classy, but also tough. Grant asked what I was doing. I told him. He laughed. He had a laugh that sounded like it surprised him every time it happened. After we got married, the Tuesday calls stayed. Sometimes they lasted 2 minutes, sometimes 20. The content didn't matter. He'd tell me about a beam that came in warped or a new guy on the crew who couldn't read a level. I'd tell him about a client who wanted their website to look more blue, but not blue. We didn't solve anything. We just checked in. The last time I talked to Grant before the accident was a Tuesday morning. He asked if I needed him to come with me to the cabin. Jeanette had called that morning, invited me up for the weekend. Said Kelsey missed me. Said the cabin needed someone young to help with the gutters. I told Grant no. I'd be fine. It was only 2 hours up the mountain. He said, "Call me when you get there." I said, "I always do." Lying in that hospital bed, counting the hours, I kept thinking about that phone call. Grant didn't know I was here. Or rather, he thought he knew. Jeanette had told the hospital he was overseas. She'd called him and said I was stable. Resting. No visitors recommended. My husband was somewhere out there, probably on a job site, probably thinking about calling me Tuesday, not knowing that the woman he trusted to watch over me was measuring the distance between my birthday and my coffin. I didn't know any of this yet. I learned it later. But lying there, I felt Grant's absence like a missing tooth, a gap where something solid used to be. The first time Donna Kowalski walked into my room, I didn't know she would save my life. She came in at 11:47 p.m. I know the time because she said it out loud, the way nurses do when they're logging vitals. 11:47, checking lines, room 412. Her voice was different from the daytime nurses, lower, unhurried, with the kind of steadiness that comes from doing something 10,000 times. Jeanette and Kelsey had left hours ago. The room was dark except for the blue glow of the monitors. The hallway was quiet. That particular middle-of-the-night quiet that hospitals get, where the silence isn't really silence, but a hum of distant machinery and muffled footsteps, and the occasional page over the intercom. Donna talked to me. Not because she thought I could hear her, at least, not that first night, but because it was what she did. 23 years of nursing had taught her, she told me later, that talking to unconscious patients was just good practice. You never know who's listening, she said, and it's a lonely business, being in a coma. All right, sweetheart, let's check your lines. Her hands were warm and dry, and they smelled like betadine soap, that sharp, clean amber scent that every hospital worker carries on their skin. She adjusted the IV drip, checked the ventilator connections, and pressed 2 fingers to my wrist. Professional. Quick. But gentle in a way that felt different from the way Jeanette touched me. Jeanette's hands were cold. Always had been. And when she touched my arm earlier that day, her fingers pressed in a way that felt less like checking my pulse and more like checking my temperature the way you'd check whether a steak was done. Donna wrote something in a small notebook she carried in her scrub pocket. Not the hospital chart, her own notebook. I'd learn later that she kept one for every shift, every patient. Timestamps, observations, things the official chart didn't capture. Little details, patterns. She clicked her pen, slipped the notebook back into her pocket, and paused at the foot of my bed. You hang in there, sweetheart, she said. Then she walked out, her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum, and I was alone again in the blue light. I didn't know it then, but that notebook would become the most important document in my life. Day 2. Jeanette and Kelsey came back at 9 in the morning. I'd been awake, truly awake, not just floating, for almost 30 hours. I'd learned the rhythms of the room, the shift change at 6, the breakfast cart at 7:30, the daytime nurse who hummed country music while she checked the IV bags. Jeanette pulled the vinyl chair closer to my bed. I heard the legs scrape the floor. Kelsey was somewhere near the window. I could tell by the angle of her voice and the faint scratch of her thumbnail against her phone case. They were quiet for a few minutes. Then Jeanette said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "The mechanic did exactly what I asked." My heart rate spiked. I felt it. A surge in my chest, fast and hot, like a fist clenching behind my ribs. The monitor beeped faster. 2 seconds between beeps instead of 4. Mom. Kelsey's voice was sharp. The machine. They both went silent. I forced my breathing slower, counted backward from 10 in my head. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. The beeping slowed. Settled. Kelsey. That was weird. Jeanette. Machines do that. The nurse said it's normal. Kelsey waited a beat then. You said it was just the brakes failing. You told me the brakes failed on their own. They did fail. Jeanette's voice was flat. I just helped them fail. The mechanic loosened the line. It wasn't complicated. Mountain road, steep grade, no guardrail on the first curve. The car does the rest. I lay perfectly still. Sweat had started along the back of my neck, sliding down into the hospital gown, pooling against the pillow. My stepmother had sabotaged my brakes. She had sent me up that mountain road alone, knowing the fawn would give out on the first curve, knowing I'd go through the guardrail or off the shoulder or into the trees. She'd planned it. She'd paid someone. And she was telling her daughter about it 3 feet from my bed, in the same tone she used to describe a recipe. I helped them fail. 4 words. My stepmother had tried to kill me, and now she was sitting close enough for me to smell her lavender hand cream, planning to finish what she started. 41 hours earlier, I was watering a basil plant. It was Saturday morning, early, the sun just clearing the fence line. Grant had left for the job site at 5, a weekend pour that couldn't wait. And I was standing at the kitchen window in his old college sweatshirt, pouring half a cup of water into a terracotta pot that had been sitting on the sill since March. The basil was leggy. I'd been meaning to pinch it back for weeks. My phone rang at 7:15. Jeanette. She sounded cheerful, which should have been my first clue. Jeanette didn't do cheerful without a reason. "Tori, honey, Kelsey's up at the cabin this weekend and she's just been saying how she misses you. The gutters need cleaning, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if you came up? Just the girls." The cabin was 2 hours north, up past Tillman Ridge, on a road that twisted through the foothills like a ribbon somebody had dropped. My father had bought it before he married Jeanette, a 3-room A-frame with a tin roof and a porch that looked out over a valley full of nothing. I hadn't been up there since the funeral. I said yes. I shouldn't have. But Kelsey had texted me 3 days earlier, something about feeling disconnected from the family, and I was still carrying enough guilt about not visiting more to say yes to almost anything that sounded like mending. I left at 8. Grant's ringtone, that old country song my father used to play in his truck, went off as I was pulling onto the highway. He asked if I needed company. I said no. The first hour was fine. The second hour, the road narrowed and climbed. I noticed the brakes around mile marker 42. Not gone, just soft. The pedal sank deeper than it should have. I pumped it twice. It caught, then released. The steering wheel shook in my hands. The guardrail came at me like a silver wall. I remember the sound. A grinding shriek, metal on metal. And then I remember the steering wheel spinning loose and the windshield going white, and a thought, clear and calm and completely ridiculous. I didn't water my basil plant this morning. Then nothing. Nothing for 3 days. Back in the ICU. Day 2. Late morning. Jeanette was on the phone in the hallway, and the door was open about 4 inches. Enough for her voice to carry. "Yes. Her husband is overseas on a construction project. He's been difficult to reach." A pause. "No. I'm her designated decision-maker. I have the healthcare directive right here." I heard the daytime nurse murmur something agreeable. Then Jeanette. "I'd prefer if we limited visitors. The doctors say stimulation could set back her recovery. No calls to the room, no outside visitors without my approval." The nurse, young from the sound of her voice, probably new to the floor, said, "Of course, Mrs. Harlow. We'll note it in the chart." Grant wasn't overseas. Grant was 40 minutes away, on a construction site in Barlow County, probably eating a sandwich from the gas station on Route 11 and checking his phone for a text from me that wasn't coming. Jeanette knew that. She'd called him the day I was admitted. I pieced this together later, and told him the doctors had everything under control, that I was sedated, resting, and that visitors would only complicate the process. She'd used words like protocol and observation period and the medical team recommends, words that sound official enough to make a worried husband hesitate. And Grant trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She was family. She'd made Douglas's soup for 12 years. She'd held my hand at the funeral and cried real tears. She had a manila folder full of documents that said she was in charge. Kelsey came back from the vending machine. I heard the crack of a soda can, and sat down in the chair by the window. What if Grant just shows up? He won't. Jeanette's heels clicked back into the room. The door closed behind her. I told him she's stable and resting, that the doctors recommend no visitors for optimal recovery. He's not the type to push back on medical advice. She was right. Grant was steady, practical, a man who believed that when a professional told you something, they probably knew what they were talking about. Jeanette had counted on that. She'd counted on his decency. My husband thought I was resting. My stepmother had made sure of that. 6 months before he died, my father called me into his bedroom. It was February. The room smelled like the eucalyptus oil Jeanette rubbed on his chest every morning and the oak dresser that had been there since before I was born. He was sitting up in bed, thin as a broomstick, with an oxygen cannula looped behind his ears and a glass of water sweating rings onto a coaster shaped like a trout. "Sit down, Tori." He patted the edge of the bed. His hand was mostly bone by then, long fingers, raised veins, skin like tissue paper, but still warm. Always warm. "I need to tell you about the trust." He explained it simply, the way he explained everything, like he was walking me through a blueprint. My mother, Lauren, had a life insurance policy, $2 million. After she died, Douglas invested it. Over 18 years, it had grown to just over $4 million. He'd set up a trust to hold it. Distribution date, my 30th birthday. Not a day sooner. "Nobody can touch it," he said. "Not Jeanette, not Kelsey, not even you until your birthday." That's how I set it up. I asked the obvious question, "What about Jeanette?" He looked at the window. The blinds were half open, striping the wall with afternoon light. "I've taken care of Jeanette differently. The house is hers. But this money..." He turned back to me. "This is your mother's money, Tori. Your real mother's." He said it like it was sacred. To him, it was. I didn't ask what would happen if I died before 30. It didn't occur to me. I was 28, healthy, married, employed. Death at 29 was not on my list of concerns. But Douglas had thought about it. He'd thought about everything. And somewhere in the trust documents, in language I'd never read, was a clause that said, if the beneficiary dies before the distribution date, the trust reverts to the grantor's estate. And Jeanette, per Douglas's updated will, was the sole heir of that estate. I didn't know that clause existed until much later, but Jeanette did. She'd known about it for a long time, maybe even before Douglas died. "Your real mother's money?" He said it with reverence. To Jeanette, those same words must have sounded like a locked door. The afternoon of day 2, Jeanette left to meet with Dr. Callahan. I heard her heels click down the hall, fade, disappear. The door stayed open. The room went quiet except for the monitor and the ventilator and the muffled sound of a television playing somewhere on the floor. Kelsey stayed behind. She didn't say anything for a long time. I heard her breathing. Uneven, wet. The kind of breathing that comes before crying. Then she moved closer. The vinyl chair creaked. Her perfume, that vanilla oat milk, came with her. "Tori." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't want this." She paused. I heard a sniffle, then the sound of her wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Mom said it was the only way. She said you'd never even know. She said the accident would look like brakes just fail sometimes, right? On mountain roads?" She said it happens all the time. Kelsey's voice cracked. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I thought she was just talking. You know how she talks." I knew how she talked. Jeanette talked about things the way she managed pill schedules, with precision and follow-through. "Your dad, Douglas. He left you everything, Tori. Everything. Mom got the house, and it's not like the house is nothing, but there's no cash, no savings. The medical bills ate everything that wasn't in the trust. Do you know what it's like watching your mom count coupons at 54? Clipping them from the Sunday paper with kitchen scissors because she can't afford the digital ones?" Kelsey's voice was rising now, tangled with tears and something that sounded almost like anger. Not at me. At the situation. At the way the numbers had arranged themselves. "I owe $87,000 in student loans. I have a business degree I can't use because nobody's hiring and my boyfriend left last month, and I'm 26 and I live with my mother in a dead man's house." She exhaled hard. "I'm sorry, Tori. I really am." Then I heard her pull out her phone. Her thumbnail tapped the screen. One quick text. I'd learn later what it said. 3 words. "How much longer?" She wiped her face one more time, stood up, and walked to the window. I heard her open the blinds. Afternoon light shifted across my closed eyelids, warm and gold and entirely indifferent. That night, Alone in the dark, I started counting. Not time. I couldn't see a clock. But rhythms. The daytime nurse came every 2 hours. She hummed country music and smelled like strawberry hand sanitizer. The shift change happened at 6. I could tell because the voices at the nurse's station changed pitch and volume, like someone switching radio stations. Donna came on at 10, checked me at 10, then 2, then 6. Her visits were shorter but more thorough. She read my chart out loud, which the daytime nurse didn't do. Jeanette arrived between 8 and 9 each morning. She stayed until 6 or 7 in the evening, sometimes with Kelsey, sometimes alone. She took phone calls in the hallway. She ate lunch in the cafeteria. I could smell the soup on her breath when she came back. I began to map my day around these patterns. The windows of safety, the stretches when nobody was watching. Between 2 and 6 in the morning, Donna's gap, I was alone. I used those hours to test my body. I started with my toes, the right foot first. A curl, a flex, a release. It hurt. A deep electric ache that ran from my ankle to my hip. But it happened. Movement. Voluntary, deliberate movement. Then my fingers. My left hand was stronger than my right, maybe because the IV was in my right arm and the tape restricted my motion. I practiced making a fist under the sheet. Open, close, open, close, like squeezing one of those rubber stress balls Grant kept in his truck. My throat was the biggest problem. I could swallow. The ventilator forced air in, but my throat muscles still worked enough to manage saliva. But my voice was locked behind something I couldn't identify. Whether it was weakness or swelling or pure neurological confusion, I didn't know. I tried to whisper once, in the dark, and what came out was less than a whisper. A hiss of air with no shape to it. I had no phone, no voice, and no way to sit up. But I had something Jeanette didn't know about. I was awake. And I was counting every minute she was gone. Day 3. The conversation that changed the math. Jeanette caught Dr. Callahan outside my room. The door was open about 6 inches. Enough to hear everything if I held my breath and let the ventilator do the work. Dr. Callahan, I need to discuss the timeline. Jeanette's voice was measured, polite, with an undercurrent of steel. She's been in a coma for 3 days. The EEG shows minimal brain activity. I have the advance directive authorizing withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Callahan spoke slowly. He had the kind of voice that carried weight without volume, the voice of someone who'd delivered bad news 1,000 times and knew that speed was the enemy of clarity. Mrs. Harlow, I understand your position, and I respect the directive. But hospital protocol requires 72 additional hours of observation before we can proceed with withdrawal of life support. This gives us time to... 72 hours? Jeanette's composure slipped for half a second. That's almost past her. Silence. I felt the pause in my chest. Past her what, Mrs. Harlow? A beat. 2 beats. Past what I can handle emotionally. I've been here every day. I need closure. Callahan didn't buy it. I could hear it in the way he paused before responding. Not long enough to be rude, but long enough to be deliberate. 72 hours is standard, ma'am. I'll schedule the evaluation for Thursday morning. If the results are unchanged, we'll discuss next steps then. Thursday morning. My birthday was Thursday. 72 hours from Wednesday morning was, roughly, Thursday at dawn. If Callahan ran his evaluation at 8 a.m. Thursday, the trust would have already distributed at midnight. Jeanette would lose everything. I heard her heels start pacing in the hallway. 3 steps, pivot, 3 steps back. The sound of someone doing arithmetic in her head and not liking the answer. Is there any way to expedite the process? Jeanette asked. A second opinion? A transfer to another facility? You're welcome to seek a second opinion, Mrs. Harlow, but a transfer would reset the observation clock. The pacing stopped. I heard her exhale. Sharp. Controlled. The kind of exhale you make when you're swallowing a scream. 72 hours. I didn't know if that was enough time, but it was all I had. Night 3. 9:15 p.m. The hallway was quiet. Past visiting hours. but Jeanette had used the healthcare directive to get after-hours access. She and Kelsey came in together. I smelled Jeanette's lavender hand cream before I heard the chair legs scrape. They whispered. Not out of concern for me. They thought I was as responsive as the mattress I was lying on, but out of habit. When you're planning something criminal, your voice drops whether anyone can hear you or not. I called Reinhardt this afternoon, Jeanette said. He says we can file for an emergency court order to override the 72-hour protocol. Compassionate withdrawal. A judge can sign off by Thursday morning. Thursday morning is her birthday, Mom. Kelsey's voice was tight. I know. That's why I need the order signed by Wednesday night. If we can get a judge to authorize withdrawal Wednesday evening, the hospital has to comply. She'll be gone before midnight. If you've ever had to lie still while someone planned your death 3 feet from your face, I can tell you this. Your body wants to scream. Every muscle, every nerve, every fiber that evolution spent 1,000,000 years building, all of it screaming move, fight, run. But the part of your brain that kept our ancestors alive in the tall grass, the part that knows sometimes the only way to survive is to play dead, that part says, don't. Move. I didn't move. Kelsey. What if she wakes up before then? She won't. The doctor said brain activity is minimal. She's gone, Kelsey. We're just making it official. She's gone. We're just making it official. My stepmother was writing my eulogy while I counted the seconds between her breaths. Peppermint tea. That's what her breath smelled like that night. She'd had peppermint tea in the cafeteria, and she was sitting close enough for me to feel the warmth of each exhale on the back of my hand. I had a deadline now. Wednesday night. Less than 36 hours. If I couldn't find a way to get word out before Jeanette got that court order, she'd have legal authority to end my life with a judge's signature and a doctor's nod. I clenched my fist under the sheet. Just once. Then I opened it. And I waited for Donna. I know what you're thinking right now. Why didn't I just open my eyes and scream? Why didn't I move? If you've ever been trapped in a body that won't listen, you already know the answer. Your muscles don't cooperate. Your voice hides behind a wall you can't break through. But here's what I need you to know. I was fighting. The only way I could. If this story is hitting close to home for you, drop a comment below. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Because what happens next is going to change everything. 2:14 a.m., Donna's second check of the night. The room was dark. The monitors cast that blue-green glow that made everything look underwater. Donna came in quietly, she always did. But tonight she moved slower than usual. She adjusted my IV line, checked the ventilator readout, and then did something she hadn't done before. She lifted my left hand to check the pulse point at my wrist. My finger twitched. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. My body just did it. A spasm. A flutter. The smallest contraction of a muscle in my index finger. But Donna felt it. I know because her hand stilled. Her breathing changed. And she didn't let go. Tori? Her voice was barely above a breath. Can you hear me? I tried again. Concentrated every ounce of whatever neural pathway was still functioning into my left index finger. It moved. A definite voluntary flex. Donna didn't gasp, didn't call for help, didn't rush out of the room. She stood there, holding my hand, and I felt her thumb press gently against my knuckle. A squeeze. Brief, professional, and the warmest thing I had felt in 3 days. Then she let go. I heard the click of her pen, the scratch of writing in her notebook. I couldn't read it, but I found out later. 2:14 a.m. Responsive finger flex, left hand. Voluntary? 2 instances. Patient may have awareness. She paused. I heard her look toward the door. A shift in the direction of her breathing. Then she clicked the pen closed and slipped the notebook back into her scrub pocket. She didn't tell the daytime staff. Not yet. She told me later that she needed to be sure. 1 flex could be involuntary. A reflex? A random firing. 2 was interesting, but she needed more before she'd risk saying anything, Because if she reported awareness and Jeanette was the healthcare proxy, Jeanette would know. And something about Jeanette. Donna couldn't explain it. Not logically. Not yet. Made her uneasy. "You hang in there, sweetheart," she whispered. Then she squeezed my hand one more time and walked out. The sneakers squeaked on the linoleum, soft as a whisper. In the dark, I curled my fingers into the sheet and held on. The next night, night 4, Donna came back at 10. She closed the door all the way this time. I heard the latch click. "Tori." Her voice was quiet but direct. No warmth this time, just clarity. "I'm going to ask you some questions. If you can hear me, squeeze my finger once." She placed her index finger in my left palm. I squeezed. One deliberate contraction. "Good." Twice for no. Silence. Then, "Are you in pain?" One squeeze. "Yes." "Can you open your eyes?" 2 squeezes. "No." "Is there someone you want me to call?" One squeeze. Immediate. Hard. "Your husband? Grant?" One squeeze. "Is his number in your phone?" 2 squeezes. My phone was gone. Jeanette had taken it from the wreckage, or from my bag. I didn't know where it was, but I knew it wasn't in this room. Donna was quiet for a moment. I heard her breathing. Steady. Deliberate. The kind of breathing you do when you're making a decision. "Listen to me carefully." She leaned closer. Her voice dropped to barely audible. "I've been a nurse for 23 years. I've seen a lot of families come through these doors. Most of them are scared and sad and doing the best they can. But some of them..." She paused. "I don't know your stepmother, but whoever told us your husband is overseas? I don't think that's true. The way she talks about your treatment, the urgency about withdrawal, something doesn't sit right." I squeezed her finger again. Hard. As hard as my weakened hand could manage. "I'm going to find your husband. I'll use your old records. You were here 2 years ago for a wrist sprain, and there should be an emergency contact on file. I'll call him tomorrow." She paused again. "But you need to do something for me. You need to stay still. Don't let anyone know you're conscious. Not the day nurses, not Dr. Callahan, not anyone who might mention it to your stepmother. Can you do that?" One squeeze. "Don't let anyone know." 4 words. But this time, they were on my side. She patted my hand, stood up, and opened the door. The hallway light cut a thin rectangle across the floor. Then she was gone, and I was alone again. And for the first time in 4 days, I felt something other than fear. I felt like somebody knew. Wednesday morning, day 5, the day before my birthday. Jeanette arrived at 7, earlier than usual. I heard her before she reached my room, talking on the phone in the hallway, her voice clipped and businesslike. The Jeanette she showed the nurses was soft, grief-stricken, a devoted stepmother struggling with an impossible decision. The Jeanette on the phone was someone else entirely. "I need the order signed today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today. I was told the judge could have it ready by..." Pause. "Wednesday evening." "Yes, I'll come to the courthouse if I have to." Another pause. Longer. "Because every day we wait is another day she suffers. That's what I'll tell the judge." Compassionate withdrawal. Compassionate. She used that word like a tool. Something you pick up, use, and put back in the drawer. Jeanette ended the call and came into the room. I heard Kelsey arrive a few minutes later. The vanilla oat milk, the soda can, the phone case scratch. "The lawyer says we can get a court order by tonight," Jeanette told Kelsey. "The judge has agreed to an emergency hearing. Compassionate grounds." "Tonight?" Kelsey's voice was thin. That means we go to the hospital tonight with the order. Dr. Callahan has to comply. The withdrawal begins before midnight." Jeanette paused. "And by morning, it's done." "Thursday morning is her birthday, Mom. I know what day it is, Kelsey." The words landed in the room like stones dropped into a pond. I felt the ripples in the silence that followed. "Can't we just..." Kelsey started. "No." Jeanette's voice was flat. "We can't just wait. If she turns 30, we get nothing." Not a cent. Do you understand? Your student loans, my medical bills, the mortgage payments Douglas stopped making when he died. None of it gets paid. We go back to counting coupons. Is that what you want? Kelsey didn't answer. Wednesday night. That was the new deadline. Not 72 hours. Jeanette had found a way around the protocol. A judge, a court order, a piece of paper that would authorize the hospital to pull my ventilator before the clock struck 12. I had maybe 12 hours. Donna had maybe 12 hours. My birthday was tomorrow. Jeanette wanted me dead by tonight. It was Tuesday. I didn't know that at the time. The days had blurred into one long fluorescent hum. But it was Tuesday. And on Tuesdays, Grant called. He didn't call me because my phone was gone, and the hospital had been told not to let calls through. But he was about to get a call from someone else. Donna found Grant's number in the hospital's records. My emergency contact from a wrist sprain 2 years earlier. She called from the nurse's break room during her lunch break at 12:15, which she told me later was the only window she had that wasn't monitored by the charge nurse on the day shift. Grant picked up on the second ring. He always did on Tuesdays. Donna told me the conversation lasted 4 minutes. She spoke first. Mr. Myers, my name is Donna Kowalski. I'm a registered nurse at Ridgeview Medical Center. Your wife, Tori, is in the ICU. She's been here since Saturday. Silence. Then Grant's voice, breaking apart. What do you mean she's in the ICU? Her stepmother called me. She said Tori was stable, resting. She said the doctors recommended no visitors. Sir, who told you that? Jeanette Harlow. She called me Saturday night. She said... He stopped. Donna heard him breathing. Hard. Fast. She said there was nothing to worry about. Donna waited. She told me later that she could feel the anger building on the other end of the line, the way you feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. Is my wife alive? She's alive. And she's awake. More silence. Donna let it sit. I'm coming, Grant said. Don't come to the front desk. Her stepmother has restricted visitor access. Come to the east entrance, 4th floor, after 10 p.m. tonight. I'll meet you at the stairwell. Is she... His voice caught. Is she okay? Donna paused. Then carefully. She squeezed my hand, Mr. Myers. Twice. 3 words before he hung up. Donna told me about them that night, sitting beside me in the dark, her voice steady and warm. He said, "She's my wife." Grant was at the east stairwell by 9:47 p.m., 20 minutes early. Donna said he was still wearing his work boots, and there was concrete dust in his hair. Donna led him down the hallway. I know this because I heard them. 2 sets of footsteps, one soft-soled and familiar, one heavy and slightly too fast, the sound of a man trying not to run. The door opened. The room was dark. Donna closed the door behind them and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "She can hear you. Go ahead." Grant's footsteps crossed the room. He stopped at my bedside. I could smell him. Concrete dust, sweat, the faint cedar soap he used every morning. And the smell undid something inside me that I'd been holding together for 4 days. My throat ached. My eyes burned behind my sealed lids. He knelt. I felt his knees hit the floor, felt the mattress shift as he leaned forward. Then his hand, rough, large, warm from running through the parking lot, wrapped around my left hand and held on. "I'm here." His voice was thick, cracked in the middle, the voice of a man fighting everything in his body to stay quiet. "I'm here, Tori. I'm not leaving." I squeezed his hand. One squeeze, the hardest squeeze I'd managed since I woke up. I heard him exhale, a shaking, uneven breath, and then silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone is crying without making a sound, shoulders trembling, jaw clenched, tears falling on hospital sheets. Donna gave him a minute. Then she pulled a chair closer and sat down across from him. "I need to tell you what's been happening." Her voice was calm, clinical. She explained the POA. She explained Jeanette's behavior, the visitor restrictions, the urgency about withdrawal, the court order being filed. She explained the 72-hour protocol and Jeanette's attempt to circumvent it. She explained what she had heard through cracked doors and noted in her notebook. Grant listened. I felt his hand tighten around mine as each piece fell into place. When Donna finished, the room was quiet. Then Grant said, "What do we do?" "You call a lawyer," Donna said. "Tonight. Preferably one who specializes in trusts and estates. And then you call the police." Grant didn't let go of my hand for the rest of the night. He sat in the vinyl chair until 5 in the morning, when Donna told him he needed to leave before the day shift arrived. He stood up, pressed his lips to my forehead, and whispered something I'll keep between us. His hand was the last thing I felt before he left. Rough, warm, steady. Not letting go until the very last second. Wednesday morning, 7:15. Grant had left at 5. I was alone. The door opened. No knock. The first thing I noticed was the perfume, vanilla oat milk, and my eyes clamped shut hard enough to hurt. Kelsey sat down. She didn't say anything for a long time. I heard her set down a cup of coffee, the cardboard scrape on the bedside table, and shift in the chair. Then she leaned forward. She was close. Close enough that I could feel her breath on my face, warm with coffee and something sour underneath. She was looking at me. I could feel the weight of her gaze like a hand pressed against my cheek. Your eyelids moved. My heart rate spiked. I felt it. A lurch. A stammer. And I prayed the monitor wouldn't betray me again. I kept my face blank, relaxed my jaw, let my breath follow the ventilator's rhythm. In, out, in, out. Kelsey was quiet. The monitor beeped. 4 seconds. 4 seconds. 4 seconds. She said it like she was deciding something. I heard her lean back in the chair, then forward again. Her hand touched my wrist. Light. Uncertain. Not like a nurse. More like someone poking a fire they think might still be lit. I didn't move. Not a flicker. Not a twitch. I emptied myself out, let every muscle go slack, let my face become the face of someone who was already gone, the way Jeanette wanted me to look. Kelsey stood up. Her chair scraped the floor. I heard her walk to the doorway and stop. "Mom," her voice in the hallway. I think she might be more responsive. Her eyelids moved, and her heart rate went up for a second. Jeanette's voice came back, distant but clear. "That's just reflexes. The doctor said it happens. Involuntary eye movement, heart rate fluctuations. It doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about it." It looked like she was... "Kelsey." Jeanette's voice hardened. "She's not awake. The neurologist confirmed it. She's not coming back." Kelsey didn't argue, but she didn't leave the doorway either. She stood there for another 10 seconds. I could feel her eyes on my face like heat from an open oven, and I held every muscle in my body so still that my own heart sounded like a drum in a cathedral. Then she turned and walked away. Grant called Martin Falk at 6:30 Wednesday morning, sitting in his truck in the hospital parking lot with the engine off and the windows down. Falk was the attorney who had drafted Douglas's trust 15 years ago. He was 71, semi-retired, and answered the phone the way people of his generation do, on the third ring, with his full name. Martin Falk. Grant told him everything. I heard this later, in pieces, from Grant, from Falk, from the police report, and assembled it the way you assemble a puzzle when you already know what the picture is supposed to look like. Falk confirmed the trust. $4,200,000. Distribution date, Thursday at 12:01 a.m. If Tori dies before distribution, the trust reverts to Douglas's estate. Jeanette Harlow, as sole beneficiary of the estate, receives everything. If your wife is alive at midnight tonight, Falk said, the trust distributes automatically. Mrs. Harlow gets nothing. She's alive, Grant said, and she's awake. Falk called Detective Morrison at the county sheriff's office. Morrison was 43, former military and, according to Donna, the kind of detective who wrote everything down and made decisions like he was diffusing ordnance. Carefully, methodically, with no wasted motion. Morrison wanted evidence. Donna provided it. Her notebook, 23 years of habit, contained time-stamped entries covering every shift since Tori was admitted. Visitor arrivals and departures. Jeanette's conversations overheard through doors left ajar. The visitor restriction request, the claim that Grant was overseas, the urgent push for withdrawal. Dr. Callahan, when contacted by Morrison, confirmed that Tori's brain activity had shown consistent improvement, consistent with a patient who was regaining consciousness, not declining. He agreed to provide the full medical record under subpoena. Donna faxed her notes from the nurse's station at 11 p.m. Wednesday night. The fax machine hummed and clicked and spat out 18 pages of timestamps and observations, each one written in the same tight, careful handwriting. 23 years of nursing. Every timestamp, every visitor, every whisper she'd heard through a door left cracked open. Donna didn't know she was building a case. She was just doing her job. The same way she'd done it every shift since 2003. The same way she'd done it when nobody was watching. The manila folder. The one Jeanette had carried into my room on day one. The one she'd set on my bedside table with that decisive clasp click. Detective Morrison obtained a copy of the healthcare directive Jeanette had provided to the hospital. He also obtained the original document from Douglas's estate attorney, the version filed 3 years earlier when I was 23 and unmarried and signing papers I barely read. They didn't match. The original directive, drafted by Douglas's lawyer, authorized Jeanette to make medical decisions on my behalf, treatment choices, medication approvals, hospital transfers. Standard scope for a healthcare POA. Nowhere in the original document was there any mention of life-sustaining treatment. Nowhere did it authorize withdrawal of ventilation, feeding, or resuscitation. The version Jeanette gave the hospital had an additional page, page 4 of 4. The original was 3 pages. This 4th page contained a specific clause authorizing the healthcare agent to direct the withdrawal of life-sustaining measures, including mechanical ventilation, in the event the patient is determined to be in a persistent vegetative state. My signature was at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. Morrison's forensic analyst identified it as a scanned copy of my signature from the original document, digitally placed onto the forged page. The resolution was good enough to fool a hospital administrator checking paperwork at intake. But under magnification, the ink density was uniform in a way that a pen-on-paper signature never is. Jeanette had added a page that gave herself permission to kill me and signed it with my own face. Morrison called Grant at 11:30 Wednesday night. "We have enough," he said. "Attempted murder, the brake tampering, conspiracy to commit murder, the plan to withdraw life support, forgery, the altered directive. We can arrest her in the morning." "Morning." Grant's voice was sharp. "She's filed for a court order. It won't be granted. I've contacted the judge's clerk. But if we arrest her tonight, we tip our hand, and we lose the ability to document the court order attempt as additional evidence." Grant didn't like it, but he understood it. The same way he understood construction. You don't pour concrete until the forms are set. The manila folder that was supposed to end my life became the first piece of evidence that would end Jeanette's. Thursday morning, my 30th birthday, 8 a.m. Jeanette and Kelsey arrived together. I heard Jeanette's heels, confident, brisk, and Kelsey's softer steps trailing behind. Jeanette was carrying papers. I heard them rustling in her hand. "We need to speak with Dr. Callahan," Jeanette told the nurse at the station. "I have a court order authorizing—" The door to room 412 opened, but it wasn't Dr. Callahan who walked in first. It was a man in a dark jacket who said calmly and clearly, "Jeanette Harlow?" "Yes? Who are—" "Detective Morrison, County Sheriff's Office. Kelsey Harlow, are you present as well?" Yes, I'm right here. What is this about?" Kelsey's voice was a full octave higher than normal. "Jeanette Harlow and Kelsey Harlow, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud." The room went silent. Not hospital quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that swallows sound. "This is absurd." Jeanette's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the edges fraying. "She's in a coma. You can't possibly—" I opened my eyes. The light hit me like a wall. White, fluorescent, blinding after 5 days of darkness. I blinked. Once. Twice. The room swam. Shapes resolved. The blue monitors. The IV stand. The window with morning light pouring through curtains nobody had bothered to close. And Jeanette, standing at the foot of my bed, manila folder in one hand, court order in the other, mouth open, no sound coming out. I looked at her. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. 5 days of silence, and everything I had to say was in my eyes. Behind her, 2 officers in uniform stepped forward. One of them read the Miranda rights. Jeanette stood perfectly still, like someone who'd been hit but hadn't felt it yet. Kelsey collapsed into the vinyl chair and put her face in her hands and sobbed. Loud, messy, gulping sobs that shook the entire chair. Grant appeared in the doorway. He was wearing the same work boots from Tuesday night. Concrete dust still in the cuffs. Donna stood beside him, technically off shift, still in yesterday's scrubs. Dr. Callahan came last, his expression the careful blank of a man who'd just learned what his patient's family had really been planning. Jeanette looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us blinked. Then they led her out of room 412, and the morning light stayed exactly where it was. 2 hours later, a man I'd never met walked into my room carrying a leather briefcase and a birthday card. Martin Falk was 71 years old, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and the posture of someone who had spent 5 decades reading documents. He set the briefcase on the rolling table, opened it with 2 precise clicks, and pulled out a folder, not manila, white, with a blue tab marked Myers Trust. "Happy birthday, Tori." He said it without sentimentality, the way a notary stamps a document. A fact, not a greeting. Grant was in the chair beside me, his hand wrapped around mine the way it had been since the police left. Donna was by the door. She'd refused to leave until Falk arrived, even though her shift had ended 9 hours ago. "As of 12:01 a.m. this morning," Falk said, adjusting his glasses and reading from the trust instrument. "The Douglas R. Myers Irrevocable Trust has fully vested in the sole beneficiary, Tori Lauren Myers. The total value of the trust, as of the most recent quarterly statement, is $4,217,000. He looked up. "It's yours. All of it. No conditions, no contingencies. Jeanette Harlow has no claim. The Slayer statute, which your father's attorney included in the trust terms, would have disqualified her even without the criminal charges." He paused. "Your father thought of everything, Mrs. Myers." I stared at him. My throat was raw. The ventilator had been removed 2 hours earlier, and every breath felt like swallowing sandpaper. But I managed one word. The first word I'd spoken in 5 days. "Thank you." Then I looked at Donna. She was standing against the wall, arms crossed, watching the scene with the expression of someone who'd been doing this for 23 years and had stopped being surprised by anything except this. Her eyes were wet. Just barely. The kind of wet that a woman like Donna would blink away before anyone noticed. "Both of you," I said. My voice was gravel, barely audible, but the room was quiet enough. Donna nodded, a small smile. Then she turned for the door. "For the record," she said over her shoulder, "your vitals were never as flat as they told me." Her sneakers squeaked down the hallway until the sound disappeared, and I held Grant's hand and watched the morning light move across the ceiling of room 412, and thought, I'm 30. The recovery took longer than the crisis. 3 weeks in the hospital, 2 months of physical therapy at a clinic on Magnolia Street, where the waiting room always smelled like lemon disinfectant, and someone had taped motivational posters to every available wall surface. My legs came back first, shaky, unreliable, like learning to walk on a boat. My voice took longer. The vocal cords had been strained by the ventilator tube, and for weeks I sounded like I'd gargled gravel. Grant said he didn't mind. He said he'd listen to me read the phone book if it meant I was talking. Jeanette's case moved through the system the way these things do. Slowly, methodically, with a lot of paperwork. The charges were severe. Attempted murder, based on the brake tampering, The mechanic she'd hired folded within 48 hours of questioning. Conspiracy to commit murder, based on the documented plan to withdraw life support before the trust distribution. Forgery, for the altered healthcare directive. The forensic analysis of the document was definitive. Jeanette's bail was denied. The judge cited flight risk and severity of the charges. Kelsey took a plea deal. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Accessory after the fact. Her attorney argued she was under her mother's influence, which was partially true and partially convenient. She cooperated fully, provided text messages, confirmed the timeline, testified about conversations I'd already heard from my hospital bed. The judge gave her 3 to 5 years. She wrote me a letter from county detention. It was 4 pages long, handwritten, on yellow legal pad paper. She apologized. She explained. She asked if I could ever forgive her. She talked about her student loans and her mother's medical bills, and the feeling of watching Douglas's money go to someone else while they counted coupons. I read it. Every word. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, though I was, for a long time, but because some relationships can't be repaired with a letter any more than a car can be fixed with an apology. The damage was structural. You don't tape a cracked axle. The house Douglas left Jeanette was subject to forfeiture proceedings once the conviction went through. The court determined the bequest was made under conditions that preceded the criminal conspiracy. I sold it and added the proceeds to my trust. My mother's money, my father's house. All of it finally where it was supposed to be. Some bridges don't need to be burned, they just need to stay exactly where they are, with nobody crossing them. 6 months later, I was sitting at my desk. The spare bedroom was still the spare bedroom. Same desk, same window, same view of the backyard. But it felt different now. I'd repainted the walls. Pale green, like sage. Grant said it looked like a doctor's office. I told him it looked like a room where someone was still alive to pick paint colors. The graphic design project on my screen was for a bakery in Cooperton. They wanted a logo. Something warm. Something with flour on it. I was on my 3rd draft, and none of them felt right. But I wasn't frustrated. I was just working. Working felt like breathing. Ordinary, automatic, and entirely precious. My phone rang at noon. Tuesday. Grant's number. Hey. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man calling from a lunch break at a construction site with sawdust on his sleeves. How's the logo? Flowery. He laughed. That laugh. The one that still surprised him every time it came out. Want me to bring home anything? Just you. Deal. I hung up and looked out the window. On the kitchen sill, where it had always been, the basil plant sat in its terracotta pot. I'd repotted it in August, after the old pot cracked during a heat wave. The new pot was slightly larger. Room to grow. The basil had taken to it immediately, the way living things do when you give them a little more space. I thought about that Saturday morning, the last normal morning, the one before the mountain road and the failing brakes and the 5 longest days of my life. I'd been standing at this window pouring half a cup of water into that pot, and my biggest concern was whether to pinch back the leggy stems. Then Jeanette called, and I said yes. I got up from the desk and walked to the kitchen. Cut 3 leaves from the basil with a pair of scissors. Set them on the cutting board for tonight's dinner. The leaves were bright green, almost translucent in the afternoon light. The color of something that had survived a drought and come back thicker. The basil was growing. So was I. 1 year later, I went back to the hospital. Not as a patient. I walked through the east entrance, the same one Grant had used that Tuesday night, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was the same. The linoleum, the muffled intercom, the particular hum of machines behind closed doors. It was 10 p.m. Donna's shift. I waited by the stairwell. I was holding a box. White, rectangular, tied with a simple ribbon. Inside were a pair of nursing shoes. Good ones. The kind with memory foam insoles and reinforced arches, because I'd looked up what nurses wanted, and the answer, apparently, was always better shoes. Donna came around the corner at 10:12, scrub-clad, notebook in her pocket, stethoscope around her neck. She saw me and stopped. "Tori." She said my name like she was confirming a diagnosis. "Hi, Donna." I held out the box. She looked at it, looked at me. Then she took it, opened the lid and pulled out one shoe. She held it up to the fluorescent light and turned it over in her hands like she was inspecting a piece of evidence. "You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to squeeze my hand at 2 in the morning, but you did." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she put the shoe back in the box and tucked the box under her arm. We hugged, short, tight. The kind of hug between two people who know that anything longer would require a conversation neither of them was ready to have. "Get out of here," she said, but she was smiling. "I have patience." I walked back down the hallway. Past room 412. Someone else's room now. Someone else's monitors. Someone else's fight. Through the east entrance. Into the parking lot. I sat in my car for a minute. The engine was off. The windows were down. The night air smelled like cut grass and the first cold edge of autumn. Some people save your life with surgery. Some save it with a phone call at 2 in the morning. Donna saved mine with a notebook, a squeeze, and a pair of squeaky sneakers. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove home with my eyes wide open. That's Tori's story. 5 days of silence, one nurse who noticed, and a birthday that came just in time. If this story reminded you to check your healthcare directive or to update your emergency contacts, take that as a sign. Do it today. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.